Right now on Tech Radio, fly me to the moon.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and across the world. This is episode 1110 with the latest on the Artemis 2 moon mission, plus a rake of other space stories. We also have layoffs at Oracle and good news for staff at Intel in Leixlip. Plus, we take a look at how Dublin Fire Brigade is upgrading its incident preparation and response capabilities with Julian Moutte of Bentley Systems.
From TechCentral.ie, this is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
I'm Dusty. Joining me as always is Niall Kitson, a man who has very recently lost a load of brownie points. Gone. Disappeared. You're like Sonic the Hedgehog and the rings have just gone because you were not watching television last night at 11:30.
Yeah, I was going to recycle my joke from a couple of weeks ago and ask, has anything happened in my absence?
Yeah.
You were texting me and you were super excited, and it was still with like 4 hours to go before launch. Like you were probably watching them strapping the pilots in.
I had the news channels on, and the news channels were kind of just checking in because, I mean, there's really not that much to be seen. They're kind of fluffing around and whatever. And it's the last hour that it gets interesting. But I was watching the NASA channel. And I thought the way they did it was brilliant, right? Because it got into the last 60 seconds. And on the NASA channel, there was very little talk. All right. Literally, you just saw the rocket sitting there and you could hear the gas in the engine, so to speak. Just that little of the thing just sitting there, and you're going, this is going to blow up. like I don't mean blow up in a bad way. I mean, it's going to take off like in 60 seconds. And it's just kind of like that moment of, and just the fact that they didn't talk as part of the feed, I thought was fantastic. So it was great. So Artemis is on the way. I love the naming for it. If anybody's wondering about why it's called Artemis, Artemis is the Greek goddess of the moon and is also the twin sister of Apollo, which was the last moon missions, if you remember your history. We have our first woman, our first person of color who are going up to the moon. And I love this bit. And the first Canadian. They spin everything.
All the minorities are represented.
There we go. Yeah. They're all going to go further from Earth than any other human being, because the plan is that the Artemis spacecraft is going to go to the moon, but it's not going to go almost down to the surface. It's actually going to stay about 4,000 miles above the moon, which means it'll go 4,000 miles further away from Earth than any other human being has done. So there's a record.
So it's kind of a slingshot kind of a thing.
Oh, very much so. It's basically kind of, this is what they did with the original Apollo missions. With Apollo, was it 9 or 10? And it's kind of like the second last stage where, okay, Graham, we have everything. We've sent an aircraft around on its own, so we know that it works. Now we're going to send people around and make sure that works. And then the next time, then we will do a landing. There's a bit of a change in that, and I'll tell you in a second. But another big story, kind of just to put Artemis and to relate it to things here in Ireland. Another big story this week was a new building that they're putting up in Cork, in Cork's rail yard. And it's going to be the tallest building in Ireland. And they have literally poured concrete for the central pillar where the lifts and everything are going to. They've done it in like 10 days. Or 12 days or something like that. Something phenomenal. Okay. So when you look at the skyline now in Cork, you've got this massive thing. It sits 25 stories tall, all right? And it's going to be the tallest building in Ireland, okay? So
we're never going to hear the end of this in Dublin.
We'll never hear the end of it, right?
Never going to hear the end of it.
That project, 25 stories tall. The Artemis rocket, 32 stories.
Wow.
Just the rocket. Just to kind of give you. Now, another little fact that I picked up, and I think this is interesting. The entire Artemis project, as in the entire project, all right, including Artemis 1, Artemis 2, etc., has cost $100 billion.
Now,
that sounds like a huge amount of money until you realize that is the same amount of money that Amazon has spent on AI.
Wow. Okay.
Not Microsoft, not Google, not Meta, not Apple, not Nvidia. Just Amazon has spent $100 billion on AI. If you were to put them all together, they spent $500 billion on AI. Artemis coming in almost in a bargain, going to the moon.
Wow.
It's unreal.
And do you
And
know
all
who
of
has
this-
said absolutely nothing about it?
Who?
Donald Trump.
Oh, of course. His big
He has said nothing about it.
the message to the American people. For God.
No, let's not go there. I just watched a podcast on it. It's infuriating. But
maybe what we could have done is combine both stories and put Donald Trump on the moon mission and have just thrown him out and see if he lands.
Maybe the White House should just do
there.
deep fakes for these things. Just, for everything that's happening, just push out a deep fake.
Not another deep fake moon story. The moon landings never happened.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
we don't need that. Anyway, looking ahead to the rest of the week, we have the launch, which was Wednesday evening. We're recording on Thursday. So the next few days are going to be outbound to the moon. They're expecting day 5, day 6 that they're going to do the flyby. And then it's literally going to be one trip around the moon and then immediately straight back again, which will take another 4 days or so. And there'll be re-entry and splashdown in the Pacific. Now, I did say the last time that they were doing this, going to the moon with the Apollo missions, it was a 3-stage. So like the first one was to send an empty craft around the moon, which they've done. And then the second stage was to send send astronauts in a space shuttle around the moon, okay, but not landing, to make sure that all that works. And then the third stage would actually to put people on the surface. This time round, they're not doing that. It was the plan, but they've changed it slightly. Artemis 3, which will happen next year, what they're going to do is going to test the docking of the lunar lander.
Okay.
Because when they go up into space, the way the rocket is designed and stuff like that, they literally have to separate the capsule and the lunar lander, and then one of them has to turn around and then they have to reattach again. If you've seen the movie Apollo 13, it's exactly what they did in that movie. Wow. So they're going to test that with Artemis 3. That'll be next year. And then the actual landing themselves is going to be Artemis 4 in 2028. And my money is going on that will be postponed until 2029, which will then make it exactly 60 years since man first landed on the moon.
Why do you think it will be postponed?
Something will happen. Technical problems, run out of money, politics, wars, God no, I don't know. Anything can happen.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? All it needs is a delay of 12 months. And that's not that unusual when you come to these kind of projects. But it would also tie in quite nicely in that, kind of Artemis 4. Man has landed on the moon for the first time. It's 60 years since the first man landed on the moon, who's Neil Armstrong. Anyway. Other space stories. Do you know what space stories are like buses, aren't they?
There's loads of them this week.
Loads of them this week. We have Jamie Palmer, a guy who was born in Tyrone, but he was reared in Tipperary since he was a kid, has founded a company called Icarus Robotics. Now, they're not based in Ireland, they're based in New York. But what they do is they design robots which are operated remotely by humans, assisted by AI, and the AI is learning from the remote training by humans. So the whole thing idea is that it'll be autonomous and AI will do everything eventually. All right. But this is very, very appropriate for space and space exploration. And our wee Jamie Palmer of the Tipperary Palmers is going to have his robot on a test mission on the International Space Station next year, 2027. So bravo for the Irish space industry, which is a lot bigger and a lot more successful than an awful lot of people think.
Yeah.
All the news this week.
And, props to the Irish Space Association, which is it's sort of the commercial body. If you have an idea that might be applicable to the space economy, of course, you can have a look at the ESA tenders as well. So, you don't have to develop something specifically for space for it to have applications in space.
No. And Jamie said that. He said the leg up that he got in Ireland was really instrumental in helping him get going in what he's doing. Other news now, I love your Starlink story. Starlink and Aer Lingus. Now, where possibly could we have a connection there?
Yeah, well, you remember a couple of weeks ago, we had a little bit of a flame war between Ryanair and Elon Musk. Ryanair had the temerity, the gall to turn down Starlink They said €1 per passenger actually doesn't make sense given the drag the apparatus would actually have on our planes. It makes no commercial sense for us to do it. We're a low-cost airline. We're a short-haul airline. It's not for us. Thanks very much. Elon Musk lost the rag. Ryanair took it and ran with it in typical Ryanair fashion. And now Aer Lingus has announced that it is taking on Starlink broadband. Makes far more sense for them to do so. Elon Musk went on X, and instead of saying welcome to our new customer Aer Lingus, said the move was cunning. You can.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no! Oh,
the mind of a child. The mind of a child. So for the lols. But from a passenger perspective, it means that if you are on a Starlink-equipped plane, not all of them will be initially, but say if you're traveling to the States, pretty good solution there. It's free. You don't have to pay extra for it. And you will be able to stream stuff for it. So you won't have to worry about downloading things ahead of time.
I find that amazing. The fact that because streaming takes up a load of data. And you would think that, kind of live internet or live anything on a tube flying at, kind of almost 1,000 kilometers an hour across one of the world's largest oceans, is a bit of a miracle. And the fact that it works at all, but you're streaming Netflix movies. And not only that, but you've got like 300 or 400 other people on the same flight possibly doing the same thing. Yeah. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It's what a time to be alive, Dusty.
It's kind of like, no, I don't think so. Sorry, I'm really in favor of Wi-Fi on planes. I had a trip down to Australia earlier on in the year, and on all the various carriers that we were on, we had WhatsApp, which was fantastic. And I enjoyed that. It was just kind of little text, wherever we're at this place and see you in 12 hours or whatever it happens to be, we weren't streaming anything. God. And we certainly weren't making phone calls. I hope to God that becomes an international law where you cannot make phone calls on a plane, even if you technically can. Do you really go? Oh, it's bad enough on a bus. Can you imagine on a plane? Oh, no. However, the WhatsApp was great, but I mean, streaming, it's kind of like, it's like AI. Look at all of the power and the money and the size of the data centers and everything. And what are we doing? We're creating stupid images for our social media feeds.
Fake cat videos.
Kind of yeah, exactly. It's a bit
not
mad.
Even
anyway, Starlink broadband coming to Aer Lingus. I think that is a great move, particularly for transatlantic flights. And also Starlink, not the only one in the game. Amazon Leo, love the name, LEO for low Earth orbit. They have done a deal with Delta Airlines in the States. So same thing, they're going to put Wi-Fi in flight on 500 Delta aircraft. Same thing, you'll be able to stream because it's a 1 gig download and 400 gig megs up. At the moment, Amazon have got 200 satellites to be able to do this, which is not a lot really, but they're talking to another company called Globalstar and hoping to buy them, which will certainly increase their capacity. But the problem is that Globalstar is owned 20% by Apple.
They will be looking for a good price.
There you go. Apple and Amazon kind of slung it out. It's not exactly like, kind of they're the best buddies at all. Another Starlink story, just to keep you up to date, was one of their satellites. And of course, all of these Starlink satellites are tiny. They're the size of a shoebox or something like that.
Yeah, they're small.
One of them just, something happened. I don't want to say that it blew up, but it's in pieces. All right. But I love the report from Starlink. It said that one of their satellites had a fragment creation event.
Fragment creation. Okay. Not something bad. It ascended.
There you go. It's in pieces. It will fall to Earth. It will be no risk to anybody. Fragment creation.
It'll burn up on.
There you go. So if you break anything, actually, do you know what? There you go. That's what we can do this Easter weekend. Is we're chopping up the chocolate eggs. We can go. That's a fragment creation event.
Fragment creation event. Wow. Conscious uncoupling from the from orbit.
There you go. There's another one. And then finally on space for this week, my goodness, so many stories. SpaceX is to float on the stock exchange. They just started the process and that it'll happen officially in the summer. Elon Musk has argued against this for a long time. And his argument is very, very simple. SpaceX, the vision, as you know, is Mars. So he thinks it's a bad idea to float on the stock exchange because investors will not be thinking about long-term Mars. They're going to be thinking short-term profits.
Yeah.
I don't want to put my money in and you're not going to go to Mars for another 50 or 60 years.
Sure.
I want to see a return on my money now. So that's why he's been arguing against it. However, it's going ahead. The good side is that it's going to put, 75 or $100 billion in the bank for SpaceX.
Yeah, but what's the valuation of the company going to be?
I think
it's going to be $1 trillion.
That's what I'm going to say. Yeah, I think it's 1.5 trillion or something like that. So there's the bad news. The good news, putting money into the bank, and then the bad news is that it will mean that Elon Musk will become the world's first trillionaire, and completely unbearable. Okay, I'm not going to argue with that. Let's get on to other news. Now, loads happening in tech, starting here in Ireland with Intel, and some good news, I believe, for everybody in Leixlip. Good news, yeah. I mean, you remember Pat Gelsinger was ejected last year as CEO of Intel, and his plan was basically for Intel to make chips for other people. He's gone. The new CEO, Moutte, kind of looks at things from the opposite direction. He is like, okay, well, first of all, I want us to be associated with market share and building product. I want us to be an engineering-led company, not a management-led company. And part of his vision was making sure that Intel buys back its Fab 34 facility in Leixlip. I remember when Intel was talking about job losses, there was an awful lot of concern about what's going to happen in Leixlip. Well, it looks like the manufacturing is fairly set for now. In 2024, Intel retained a 49% share it sold off, 51% of Fab 34? Anyway, it sold off 49%, yeah, and it has just bought it back. So it sold it off for, I think it was 11.2 billion, and has bought it back from Apollo, which is an asset management firm, for 14.2 billion. So, the cost of a turnaround and all that, but it does show a commitment to the new strategy. It shows that Intel is serious about making chips to get into AI, which is better for the market, for pricing and for diversification. So it's all good news. I can't see a downside. So we're keeping fingers crossed that that'll be good for jobs in Leixlip. However, another huge tech giant has announced that they're going to be letting go up to 30,000 staff. So at the time that we're talking, it is still not confirmed how many people have actually been let go. But I think it was Tuesday morning. It was Tuesday evening here in Dublin when I started seeing people posting on X about getting future endeavoured by Oracle. And it's guessed that up to 30,000 people are being let go by the company. The short version is that this is all AI related. It's company wide. I have an article going up on Tech Central exploring what AI related means when it comes to this. When it comes to this change, we have to look at it from the perspective of investors. Love it when companies let people go, because it implies that organizations are getting leaner. In the case of AI, it shows that Oracle believes in the technology so much that it's willing to let its own people go to have AI pick up the slack. You look particularly skeptical about this, and I completely understand why. What's your gut reaction? Yeah, I think it's a mistake to be letting go of that amount of people, and especially, kind of if you're relying on AI to do it. I hate seeing people saying that they're letting people go due to AI. Wow, that's a lot of people. I use AI all the time. All right, and AI is getting better and better and better, but it is still not reliable, not as good as a human being. It's a fantastic tool. The right human using it, it's an amazing tool, and you can get so much done so quickly. It's fantastic. But with my experience with AI, it's just not good enough to be working on its own. And you're finding that in coding and stuff like that. And like everybody goes, oh, it's amazing. It does this code, but does it decode? All right. And if it does decode, like who's going to figure out where it's going wrong? Because it was the AI who wrote it wrong in the first place.
Yeah, and we see an awful lot with hallucinations as well. We saw, we might have covered this a few weeks ago about a case that went before the courts in New York, I think it was, where it was found that legal precedents were just made up. They were AI hallucinations.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what AI produces, you still have to check it. So you would have to wonder, okay, it took the AI X amount of time to generate something I had to think about, and now I have to review it to make sure it's factually accurate and to make sure the AI hasn't slipped anything in. So whether or not it is actually a time saver is really up for question. I mean, when we look at any sort of project, there's kind of the idea of the fat middle, right? It's like you have the idea and maybe it doesn't take that much in terms of time of formulating the idea. What takes the time is actually sitting down and writing out, say, the press release or the proposal or whatever. But then on the other end, you still have to go back and you have to review everything there. So the amount of labor you're saving yourself is the bit that's the most annoying to yourself, but you still have to revisit it. Discuss.
And the other thing I found with the AI, but when we're doing like kind of production stuff, it's kind of, if we're doing research and stuff like that, AI is great because it gives us back a whole load of research. And it's like, yeah, but it gives us back too much. Do you know what I mean? So like, and I find like if it's writing something or whatever, it overwrites. And it doesn't write as good as a human would.
Yeah.
So, no, I think it's an amazing tool, but I wouldn't want to be. Now, there's other things like, sorry, I'm being very a tin hat is what I'm thinking of. What I'm thinking of is facial recognition. All right. And AI. So if you have, kind of a human being would never keep up with a crowd of 50,000 people by being able to look at and recognize each of the 50,000 faces and then monitor them across 200 cameras to see where an individual human is going. But AI can do that.
Yeah.
That's an amazing use for it, So like AI is good. However, one thing that we have a problem with on planet Earth at the moment, in fact, there's two planet problems we have. One is the war in Iran. We have the whole energy issue and oil and stuff like that. But AI is also creating a dilemma because it uses so much power. So that's one thing, all right? And then the other thing is, I don't know if you've noticed recently, but the price of RAM has gone through the roof, which is putting the price of all electronics up.
No, here is where we diverge. If you've been checking the prices on Amazon lately, you'll find that the price of RAM has actually gone down. And there's a very interesting reason for this. Last year, Sam Altman went out to South Korea and he signed letters of intent with two companies, with Samsung and with SK Hynix, right? For 900,000 DRAM wafers per month, right? 40% of the global RAM produced next year. Sam Altman said, yeah, OpenAI, we will take it. Thank you very much. To such an extent that I think you were talking about this with Jason the other week, that Crucial closed down. That was the consumer-facing wing of SK Hynix. But no, Altman has stepped back and said, you know what, those letters, those actually weren't contracts. They weren't commitments. They were basically, gentleman's agreement. And I ain't no gentleman,
that's why it's called a letter of intent. I intend to do blah, blah, blah.
It was totally non-binding, and OpenAI has backed away from that letter of intent. And a couple of things have happened to do with OpenAI that, I think one of the stories broke on Friday, so you wouldn't have had a chance to report it. But one was the closure of Sora, which was OpenAI's video generator. Okay. So an awful lot of that wonderful cat slop that we happen to be inundated with would have been created with Sora. So that is being closed down. We have OpenAI walking away from this not deal to buy RAM. And we also have OpenAI walk away from a plan to open a data center in Abilene in Texas. Now, you remember that OpenAI is in an agreement with SoftBank, MGX, there's probably somebody else involved in there as well, as part of the Stargate initiative, of which Oracle is a technology partner, right? And it's worth about $400 billion. Elon Musk was a skeptic. He posted on X that, look, the money isn't there. So I don't know why you're getting excited about this. But I mean, we know that there's personal animus involved there between Altman and Musk anyway. So I don't think it would be a poor bet if anyone was to put a celebrity death match together. I don't think anybody really would be too troubled who lost, so long as somebody comes away with a black eye. So yeah, Abilene is not happening. The RAM deal is not happening. Sora is closed down. What does this say? Well, it says that OpenAI is looking to start minimizing its costs, is looking to bring down the amount that it's spending on compute, the amount that it's spending on power. It's a pretty big signal to the market. Now, if you remember sort of what happened with the dot-com bubble, and with the AI bubble, everybody is just waiting for it to pop because there's very little in the way of companies actually making money out of AI happening right now. And the companies that are meant to be making money from AI, so it's the NVIDIAs, the ARMs, the OpenAIs, Microsofts, they're selling to each other. These are all paper deals. So they can say, we have sold 5 billion in services to Microsoft, who in turn are giving us 5 billion in data in compute or something like that. These are circular deals with no money actually changing hands. But, it's just invoice swapping.
Am I correct in thinking that, and I hate to be the one to say that this time it's different, but the dot-com thing, there was a huge amount of investment going into these companies. People were putting money into these companies. They were spending huge amounts of money on setting up websites and the internet and how exciting it was and dot-coms and all that kind of stuff. This time around with AI, we have companies who are putting in huge amounts of money into developing, AI, which is the next internet, if you want to put it this way. But I think what's different this time is that they're putting in cash that they have sitting in the bank. They've got huge cash reserves, and that's what they're putting into AI. They're not going and taking on huge debt. They're not borrowing money. They're not taking money from investors or anything like that. This is just cash that they've had.
Yeah, but that cash is going to have to develop a return at some point.
Very true.
That's what happened with the dot-com crash. I mean, people started going, oh, hang on, where's my money? Where is the revenue here? And nobody was actually making money. So that's a problem. Another problem is sort of projects like Starlink, where there is an overinvestment in infrastructure, which means that there will be an oversupply, which means that you will basically have these massive structures taking up massive amounts of energy, requiring an awful lot of maintenance, but they're not generating any revenue to sustain themselves. So that's a massive problem as well. So, I think we've talked about all these issues at various stages on the pod, but this is a problem. Now, another massive problem, which was just released this week, was a paper, two papers released by Google. One was on quantum computing, which basically said, we've done something and it's basically going to crack crypto.
Ooh, okay.
So this whole, non-traceable element of cryptocurrency, sorry, we've found a way around that. We have the machine that will do it, right? Now, they also released a paper that said, yeah, that whole AI thing, we can do that with 60% less compute power than is needed at the moment. Ooh. Massive savings on power, massive savings on hardware. You will be able to build data centers smaller and cheaper, both to build and to run, right? So I think we are going to see an awful lot of empty, massive warehouses or much cheaper massive warehouses that will be net revenue drains. So yeah, I think Google has really changed the game in the past week. And I think, there's a lot of moving parts here. I think maybe OpenAI got wind of something was happening and said, okay, we're scaling back everything. We will just do things that we want to be good at, like getting government contracts. And, in terms of the mind share of the general public, people seem to be flocking towards Anthropic now and Claude because OpenAI has become the unfriendly face of AI.
And I know I've spoken to one or two people who don't use OpenAI or ChatGPT anymore because of a certain involvement they have in geopolitical events at the moment. Sure. And they're steering clear of it because of that. So it's kind of, it's kind of, as my dad would always say, like kind of, we live in interesting times. And I think, you've got whatever the politics and the change in the world order, you've got this risk to supply of oil affecting 20% of the world's supply, which is happening with Iraq. And then you also have AI, huge amounts of money going in. And now, from what you're saying, is that the AI companies themselves are starting to pull back from certain deals. And then others have found ways to do what everybody else is doing for like 60% cheaper.
Yeah. And this is the thing, like AI is indeed coming for your job, but it's not necessarily because AI can do the things you can do. It's because certain companies have overextended themselves in AI and are looking to make cost savings.
This is a very big article that you're writing. When do you expect it to be published?
Sure. No, it's by the time you're
whatever.
Sure. No. By the time we drop, it'll be up. It'll be online.
Have you ever heard of a deadline? Have you? So you reckon that'll be online at some stage over Easter at techcentral.ie. Listen, Niall, as always, thank you for keeping us up to date with what's happening in the world of tech. We'll talk to you next week.
Delivering Irish tech news since 2006, this is Tech Radio.
Digital twins have shown themselves to be useful for many things, from planning, maintaining public services, and tourism. And they have found a further use case by helping the emergency services in creating plans for dealing with major incidents. Julian Moutte is Chief Technology Officer with Bentley Systems, and he sat down with Niall Kitson to discuss his company's work in Dublin and the importance of open data in smart cities.
Julian, thanks for joining us on the podcast. So first and foremost, for people that aren't familiar with Bentley Systems, if you can just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm a Chief Technology Officer at Bentley Systems, and we are a software company who is creating products and tools for the engineers of the world that are designing, building, and operating infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I mean railways, roadways, bridges, etc. And we provide them the tools so that they can better design and better build those infrastructure to advance the quality of life for the citizens of the world.
So your work in Dublin, I think, is pretty interesting because it has broad applications, but we'll focus a little bit on what's happening with Dublin Fire Brigade. So tell us a bit about how you approach this project, because when it comes to mapping a city, there are so many considerations to go in there. I mean, it doesn't begin and end with street maps. We've seen cases of digital twins being used for navigating, maybe tourists picking out places they want to visit, or in another case, we've seen a university create a twin to help people navigate during their first few weeks in college. So how does that expand out to Dublin City in your experience?
So many cities of the world today have the data layers that you've referenced here, right? You have the map of the streets, public transportation, the shapes of the buildings. In cases you have satellite imagery, that's going to give you the visual appearance of buildings with some kind of a 3D shape. But what is missing in many cases is the engineering accuracy layer, which is allowing you to not only navigate around those buildings and the city and find what you're looking for, but also understand what are the kind of engineering applications for the buildings or the roadways or the railways that are around that city. And that's where it's interesting for us to come and join the conversation, because many companies are already active, as you've mentioned, and also universities, but bring the engineering dimension to this to potentially unlock new outcomes and new breakthrough. And you've mentioned the Dublin Fire Brigade, but more generally, Smart Dublin is trying to make sure that Dublin is one of the smarter cities out there. They're integrating IoT sensors in the city. Ireland has created a very interesting program to make sure that all the publicly funded projects are generating what we call building information management data. This is called the BIM mandate. So in the next coming years, all of those public projects will have 3D models that are engineering accurate of the buildings that are being constructed. And when you bring all of this together, then you can do some of the things that the Dublin Fire Brigade is doing, which is better planning of emergency response for high-risk buildings and making sure that they can act faster, make better decisions, and do a better job at protecting our lives.
So let's have a look at the system that was being replaced. I mean, I was quite surprised to hear that the fire brigade was literally still using pen and paper in order to make notes about parts of the city or their incident response plans. So how has that process changed?
So instead of having to work with those extensive processes of collecting the data in paper sheets and collecting them together, the process is now about collecting 3D models of those buildings with as many details as possible. So it's not the external shape of the building only, it's also internally, where are the stairs, where are the hydrants, where are the emergency exits, what are the kind of rooms, and what is the configuration of the building itself. But there's also everything that is around the building, knowing the precise position of fire hydrants, how to access that building, the sensors that are giving you information about the temperature or about the pressure in the water network are all very important points to that emergency planning. So they're basically bringing all of that information together into a digital replica of those buildings and eventually at some point of the city. Combining and aligning all of those data layers together. And then with this, they have the tools to be able to do the emergency planning in advance, but also when they need to actually get into action, they can also bring that information with them in the fire engines and then find the details that are going to matter at the last minute to make the right decisions in seconds instead of having to crawl through enormous piles of paper.
One application within this, within the DFB service, is the ability to identify derelict buildings, buildings that are not in use. Have you had any feedback from the fire service as to how useful this level of detail has been so far?
So right now they are still experimenting. They've done a few proof of concepts with some specific sites with different type of partnerships. They've partnered with the Dublin City University, for instance, because they have a digital twin of the campus, and there they've quickly realized that the planning time is going from more than 7,000 of hours to a much shorter. I think it's a factor of 6 in terms of the preparation work. So for them, it's a lot less work to do this, right? And then finding the right information during an emergency, I think it was clocked at 12 seconds to find the right information, which is as you can guess, in those kind of emergency response, quite time critical. So the feedback has been very positive. It is yet to be seen how you deploy and amplify the number of buildings, areas of the city that are covered by this digital twin. How this is potentially also achieving some level of scale, where you can start to measure this in terms of reduction of number of casualties in incidents and things like that, which is for now not measured.
It's a really impressive use of digital twins. However, Dublin has been quite forward-looking in terms of using digital twins to potentially automate other management services. So if you can just give us a whistle-stop tour of those.
Yeah, so you're right. The team at Smart Dublin is quite visionary, and they have already taken quite a few initiatives to add IoT sensors, for instance, along the Liffey. So, we have those live ring buoys. Sorry for my pronunciation. French speakers are struggling with that word. But every time one of those ring buoys is missing, then someone's life could be at risk. So they have sensors to be able to detect that. And when you think about how they were detecting that before, someone had to walk along the Liffey to look if those buoys were missing and provide an inspection report on paper so that they could eventually get replaced. Well, now this is compressed. They know immediately when the buoy is missing, and they can go and act on the next day. They've also deployed sensors on the gullies in the streets to be able to detect when one of those gullies is obturated, and then there is a risk of flooding the street and potentially houses and creating damage. And we've seen this winter with the storms we've had that this is an important problem, right? They also have sensors in the Liffey to measure the flow of the water and then to detect if there is potentially going to be a risk and if you need to act on the floodgates that are, for instance, along the Dodder. And there are many, many more. And as you can see, that Dublin is investing massively to address the challenges of population growth and the fact that we are growing every day. There's a lot more to be done with public transportation. As you know, there is the bigger project with Metrolink. And I think this is just the beginning of what that team can do.
I think that element of urban planning is so important because it's about so much more than just putting houses onto a plot of land. It is about amenities. It is about extending infrastructure. Where do you see, in the past, where has Bentley fit into that sort of process? Has there been a lot of preparation at an international level?
So urban planning is a vast problem, right? So at Bentley, we are providing the tools for the different kind of engineering disciplines. So we'll be helping the teams that is working on planning power generation and power distribution and transportation. And then we provide them the tools to do that. There's also the water networks. And right now, those are all different teams that are working with their set of tools, with their own data, and making their own decision. I think that where things are going to go is really around the fact that you want all of those teams to exchange data so that they can then build a more comprehensive digital twin of the city and eventually take into consideration the aspects that other teams are working on into their own decision, which is right now a struggle. So that's one of the ambitions we have at Bentley because, as I mentioned, we want to really advance the quality of infrastructure. And one of the things we realize is that to be able to make those better decisions, you need to have a broader aperture of context. You need to take more parameters into consideration, like what is underground. There are so many infrastructure projects today that are failing because when we start digging, there is a big surprise. We didn't know what was in the under the ground, right? So bringing all of those kind of dimensions together is going to help us all advance the kind of outcomes we can get from infrastructure. So. Yeah, I don't know if I've answered your questions. Maybe you want to follow on that. Did I?
No, you've covered that quite nicely. So it is fascinating that there are so many sort of hidden problems, if you will. But one problem that also occurs when dealing with data is, are you actually tripping all the switches that you want to and how reliable the data is? So I imagine standardization is an issue you also have to deal with.
You're right. Standardization is an important topic, but there's also making sure that this data remains accessible in the long run. So one of the things that we are quite passionate about at Bentley is the fact that as you create all of those layers of a digital representation of the city or the infrastructure, you need to make sure that those data layers are using open standards so that citizens have access to it. And we've run a hackathon last year with Google here in Dublin because we have a big team in Dublin. And we were exploring what can we do by combining the data from Google together with our tools and technologies using open source and open standards, and then providing visibility and transparency to citizens, but also letting them explore what they could do with all of that data. So yes, you have to be careful about the standards to foster interoperability between those teams, as you've mentioned, but also the openness, because a city, an infrastructure, has a lifespan which is counted in decades, if not centuries, and you need to make sure that the data you aggregate over time or that you build around that city is also as durable as the infrastructure itself. And that we believe is requiring quite a bit of openness and standards.
I suppose one of the good news stories then from an Irish perspective is that Dublin has actually been particularly forward-looking in the use of open data. Do you think that's a fair comment?
I would say that is true. There's always more that can be done, right? So I've mentioned this BIM mandate, which I think is going to help with that aspect. But we need to continue pushing to provide more data sources, more openness and interoperability. I would say we are probably halfway there.
And that was Julian Moutte, Chief Technology Officer with Bentley Systems, chatting with Niall Kitson.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show this week. Do check out some of the other stories we have online for you, including...
Yeah, we have some European alternatives to Microsoft Office. Chatbots are learning to say no to users. And Bolt's plan to get thousands of robo-taxis online across Europe. And
Niall is too modest to mention it, but also that deep dive into AI, which he is finishing off as we speak. It'll be all there at techcentral.ie. We're back again next Friday with a brand new show for you. Please do remember to share the podcast with a friend. Time to look up for Tech Radio Ireland on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. From myself, Dusty, and from Niall Kitson, have a wonderful, wonderful Easter, and we'll see you next week.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio 1 Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.